So, the song I'm listening to in the background is London's Burning by The Clash, because on this day in 1666, the Great Fire of London began. Luckily it cleared out the plague a bit, but it must have been kind of not very much fun for people there at the time. I think 80% of the city burnt down. It was chronicled by a couple of writers, most famously by Samuel Pepys, and he wrote about drinks that he used to drink in London. One of them was called a Purl, P-U-R-L, and that was a kind of wormwood ale. And then later people began to drink it with gin in it, and it would be a sort of breakfast drink with a weakish ale, to get you started properly in the day. So I kind of thought, I'm going to sort of combine all of those ingredients and come up with something that I'm going to call, and I am calling, the London Purl. So I'm going to take the gin first of all, and I'm going to put obviously a London dry gin. I'm using Beefeater like I often do. 1.5 ounces of that into my pewter tankard, which is an American pint, not a British one. But it's interesting, it's got a clear bottom. That was to avoid being slipped the King's shilling and being sent off to sail in the Royal Navy. Anyway, I'm going to put 1.5 ounces of that gin in there, but I'm kind of combining this idea of it being wormwood, and the famous wormwood liquor is, of course, absinthe. And I'm just going to put a tiny, 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 tiny drop or two of that in there like so. But then also, because the ales at the time were kind of a bit like the wild ales people make now, and I'm going to put a little spot of cardamom bitters in there just to liven that up a bit. You'll notice I'm not putting any ice in. I mean, the English famously in our warm beer, right? So I've got an English beer. It's not a London beer, unfortunately, but it is a great beer by Samuel Smith. It's their organic pale ale. Beer wasn't super strong, well, until it was in England, because you drink it all the time for breakfast and everything else in between there and going to sleep, because you needed beer to sort of, because the water was so terrible, and you could die from it, whereas as beer and ale, you were more likely to live. Now, that looks fantastic, my foaming beer. Let's see what this is like. Wow, that is refreshing, and it will certainly put out some fires.